Who will cry for the black children? Lost and all alone. Who will cry for the black children abandoned without their own? Who will cry for the black children who cry themselves to sleep? Who will cry for the black children whomever had for keeps? Who will cry for the black children who walk the burning sand? Who will cry for the black children, the children inside the man and the woman? Who will cry for the little children, black children who knows well hurt and pain? Who will cry for the children who died again and again? Who will cry for black children, good children they have tried to be? Who will cry for the children who cries inside of me? You all, I'm still crying for our children. Enough of us are not crying for our children. Enough of us are not valuing our children. And when I called Dr. Winbush again 3 months ago and said, Dr. Winbush, can you come and do this for us? Because I still don't think that we are valuing black children and youth enough. He paused and says, Richard, I want to, and I will be there, without hesitation. So this brother has been crying for black children and black youth and black people for a long, 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 long time. And it is my honor and pleasure. You can read his bio in the book, you all, but it's my pleasure and honor to introduce to some of you who may not know him. And again, if we were to put all of his works in this book, it would fill up the entire book. But I want you all to look at his book. It's called A Warrior Method. The Warrior Method, and in his book, the last chapter, the epilogue, he has a chapter that deals with the parable of the white elephant. He's not going to probably share that, Jan, because he doesn't have time. Right, Dr. Winbush? The parable of the white elephant. In the poem that I read to you, this movie, Antoine Fisher, it's taken from Antoine Fisher. I urge you all to go and watch that movie, because quickly Antoine Fisher found the right therapist, he found the right sister, he found his family, his adverse childhood experiences were resolved because he found a trusted therapist, Denzel Washington. Denzel Washington gave him 2 books, The Slave Community, Dr. Kevin Washington, and what's the other book? The Philosophy and Opinions of Marcus Garvey. So he basically said, this is what happened to us, The Slave Community by Dr. John Blassingame. And then Dr. Prim, he did what? He basically then gave us the way forward with the Philosophy and Opinions of Marcus Garvey. So you all, again, that movie is a powerful movie. So again, I've spent too much time introducing this speaker, but I just wanted you all to know that he's been crying for our children, our people, and our youth, and he is going to take us home. So without further ado, Dr. Raymond Winbush.
Thank you, Richard, and thanks, Jan, for inviting me here. I've got, 45 minutes to tell you how to stay mentally healthy in a white supremacist world, and that ain't easy. So I'm going to start with that, and before I really go into the presentation, I bring you greetings from Morgan State University, where I teach. A lot of Morganites here, that's right. If you like football, we gave the world Leroy Kelly, the running back for the Cleveland Browns. I'm from Cleveland, so I'm cheering for the Cavs tonight, okay? If you like music, we gave the world Denise Williams. Y'all know who she is. Remember, this here for the boys, I think. If you like business, we gave the world Earl Graves, the founder of Black Enterprise Magazine, and our newest building on campus is named after him. But our greatest gift was a sister who graduated from Morgan State High School back in 1918 by the name of Zora Neale Hurston. And that is something that we are very proud of. So if you haven't read Their Eyes Watching God, you have not lived. And you should read that. Not what Halle Berry did a couple years ago, but what she actually did. I'm going to start by telling you 2 things before I tell you 12 things that I think every black person should do. And I'm revealing some secrets here, so I'm going to give you this first slide. Y'all know who that is? Anybody know who that is? How many people saw the movie Black Panther? Okay, most of us did. That's Ryan Coogler. And a couple of weeks ago, actually about 6 weeks ago, I was sitting in my room over, at home, minding my own black business. And the phone rang, and it was a guy on the phone by the name of Charles King. He's one of the biggest black producers in Hollywood now. He produced the film Thurgood. Did you see Thurgood? And also Denzel Washington's two new films. I did not know until about 6 months ago that I had taught him when I was teaching at Vanderbilt University in Nashville. And he used to follow me around a lot. He was like a little nerd, and would say, Ray, if you had to do it all over again, what would you do? And I said, I would make movies and that were positive about black folk. And then he went off and did that. He's now worth $80 million. I'm not worth that much. So anyway, he told Ryan Coogler to call me because Ryan Coogler is, everybody knows Black Panther, biggest film that was ever made, and he wants to do a follow-up film on Black Panther. But before he does that, he said he's worried about young children just knowing Black Panther as a superhero. So we met in Chicago, and his next film is going to be about a real Black Panther. And I'm not privileged to say who it is, but the film will be out next year. So that's all I'm going to say. It's going to be about a real Black Panther. So I'm doing the history and work for him about this real Black Panther. I'll give you a hint. He lived in Chicago. That's all I'm going to tell you, okay? I shouldn't have said that much, but I did anyway. The next thing I want to tell you is that, is Faraji here? Did he leave? He had to leave. Faraji kept begging me. He had a baby his wife had a baby about a year ago, to revise Warrior Method, so I did it. My first editor for Warrior Method, that's the early edition. She was kind of a flag-waving black person, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. And so she told me, Ray, you should put the cover in red, white, and blue. So if you notice, the first is red, white, and blue. She left HarperCollins, so my next one, which will be out on Tuesday, if you notice, I tried to get it. I don't know how good a job I did, Richard, but I made it red, black, and green. Can you see that? And y'all know what that means, okay? That's all I'm going to say about that. So it comes out on Tuesday, and much of what I'm saying today is contained in that book. So the first thing I want to say is about what is the post-traumatic slave syndrome. How many of you have heard of that concept? Joy DeGruy. It is an explanatory theory which posits that centuries of enslavement in the United States, followed by systemic and structural racism and oppression, have resulted in multi-generational maladaptive behaviors which originated as survival strategies. Now, I made this presentation last week in Detroit, and I had 50 areas. And I went through them because it was a workshop, so I ain't got but 45 minutes. But you should read this book if you already haven't. How many of you have read those books? Post-traumatic slave syndrome. You got to read those because we often think that we have somehow transcended enslavement. And America wants us to forget about enslavement. It will tell us to remember the Alamo. It will tell us to remember the Maine, but it will tell us to forget about enslavement. And there is still lingering impact on us because of that, particularly in the area of mental health. And I'm going to give some examples. For example, here's some John Henryism. This is a term actually coined. These are black folk that work so hard to please white folks. Just break their back saying, he's doing $8,000 a month in sales, I got to do 10,000. Just always trying to please people classified as white. And another example is a super slave. A black person who occupies a high position, but has power, but still defers to people classified as white. I'm going to give you some examples. I'm going to call some names, then I'm going to take us all home, Richard, okay? So here's a John Henryism victim. Y'all know who that is? I know he's deceased and you're supposed to speak well of the dead, but Sammy really worked hard to please white people. And this is something that can be deleterious to your health. Some of you old enough remember when he embraced Richard Nixon in the middle of Watergate and stuff. So he's a good example of somebody who experienced and was traumatized by John Henryism. Here are some examples of super slaves. Y'all know who these people are? Upper left-hand corner, who's that? Clarence Thomas. Upper right-hand corner, who's that? Omarosa. You know, I could tell you something about Omarosa that's very personal, but we on tape, so I ain't gonna say anything. But I'm gonna just stop there. Who's lower left? Who's that? Stacey Dash. Stacey Dash, who said that Bill O'Reilly was her example of the perfect man. Bill O'Reilly, out of her black mind. And lower right, I know this is a homeboy, Ben Carson. See, he's just lost his black mind. It's gone. It's not there anymore. It's absolutely gone. So these are two examples. I could give you a whole bunch more about mental disorders among black folk, but it results from white supremacy, which brings me to my next slide. So to paraphrase Baba Neely Fuller, okay, repeat this after me. Just say this. If you, go ahead, I ain't gonna read it, read it.
What it is and how it works, everything else that you understand will only be.
This is probably one of the most important things that mental health, black mental health workers need to know. White mental health workers, most of the time, I didn't say all of the time, they ignore that, and unfortunately many of us ignore that. So I don't say that people are Uncle Toms. I will call them super slaves. But Kanye West is confused. He's not in the sunken place. He's below the sunken place. And many of these people are simply confused. Omarosa is confused. And people who say things that are just outrageous, like what is that woman, Roseanne? Like yesterday, there was a sister on Fox News that was supporting what Roseanne said. Supporting, a black woman, supporting that stuff. Ben Carson saying things that, again, just out of his black mind. Crazy, just absolutely crazy. So the first thing you should do is to understand what racism, white supremacy does to the individual. I wish I had time to go into this a little bit further. The number two, these are things that will keep you mentally healthy. Maintain deep political involvement in the African community. Don't just say, you know, I'm gonna just complain about everything. Vote. You know, black folk, we still gotta vote more than we do. But voting should be the beginning of your political involvement. It shouldn't be the end of, a lot, you know, us say, well, I voted, that's all I gotta do. You should do other things. There's a lot of things, like right now, I've committed myself, and Richard, this is gonna be hard for me, but I've committed myself, I'm not looking at one drop of the NFL this year until they, and I know that's hard for, and I'm including the Baltimore Ravens, because Colin Kaepernick should have been hired years ago now. And I hope this is true that several of the players, black players, you know, are thinking about sitting out the entire season. And they're only trying for 25%. And see, I've told a black football player that many of you know, I said, look, you brothers are doing 2 or 3 here this week, 2 or 3 there that week. All black football players have to do, all they got to do, one Sunday, just one Sunday, nobody goes to work. Just nobody goes to work. That's political involvement. It's political involvement. The second thing, possess a deep and abiding knowledge of global African history will keep you mentally stable. Now, during February, we had Black History Month. Who's usually up on children's bulletin boards at school during Black History? Martin Luther King's up there. Malcolm X just got up there when Spike Lee kind of sanitized him. Who else? Rosa Parks, right, Martin, who? Harriet Tubman, because we in Maryland, and Oprah. And I know there's some more. But see, what about Martin Delaney? Y'all ever heard of Martin Delaney? We should have a deep understanding of Black history that goes way beyond what they choose to give to us. Our president, I said I wasn't going to say anything about him, but I am. Our president thought Frederick Douglass was still alive. Remember that? Remember that? I'm not making this up. He said, what did he say, Richard? Frederick Douglass is doing a good job. That's your president. Lord have mercy. Who's this a picture of up there? Anybody know that? Dr. John Henry Clark, one of the greatest historians in the history of Black folk. And see, it's amazing because sometimes I'll be speaking before white audiences and they'll say, well, do we have to know this stuff? Yes, if you really do. For example, if I went to Japan and I was going to do work with the Japanese, I need to know something about Japanese history. If I go to a Native American reservation, I need to know something about that culture specifically. It's amazing when you ask many workers that work with our children, you'll say, what do you need to know if you're teaching Latinx children? And they'll say, well, I need to know something about speak Spanish, maybe something about Cinco de Mayo, whatever. If you know Asian children, well, what part of Asia? But when we talk about our Black children, we just stare. They don't know. And many of us think that Black children are merely chocolate-covered white children, and they are not. They have their culture, and we oftentimes don't teach to their culture because we don't know their culture. Okay, again, I ain't got but 45 minutes. Read at least 30 minutes a day about African culture and or life. And you know, my students at Morgan will say, Doc, that's a lot. I said, you look at Empire for an hour. You look at that, what's that show on Thursday night, How to Kill Everybody? What's it called? That's right, How to Get Away with Murder. You look at that for an hour. 30 minutes a day, you should read something about Black folk. Read something, okay? The next one, listen to a variety of African music. Hip hop is good. I love hip hop. Some of my best friends are in the industry, but so is jazz. I spoke at an elementary school here a few weeks ago, and I told anybody if they knew 50 Cent's real name, I would give them 50 cents. So they all knew, the little kids, they all knew that. But then I asked them, I would give them $20 if they would tell me the biggest jazz album of all time, the sold more album. Nobody answered. And so I said, Miles Davis, Kinda Blue. I came to the school a couple days later, and a little boy ran up to me and said, it was Miles Davis, can I get the $20? I said, so he remembers that. He remembers that. When I was young, thousands of years ago, we would listen to a variety of music. We would listen to R&B, the blues, reggae. My mother and father, we would dance to Motown with the Supremes and all of that. Kids nowadays listen to their music, and mom and dad oftentimes listen to their music. And we should do that together. The next one. Attend African-centered faith community. If you have a white Jesus hanging up in your church, something's wrong. I'm going to just say it. There's something wrong. A couple of years ago, I went to the Louvre and in Paris. That's the biggest museum in the world. And they had this exhibit called Early Depictions of Jesus. And it was in the basement, of course. And the Louvre is huge. It's huge. I mean, they say if you spend, I think, like 30 seconds at each exhibit, you'll be there for 50 years or something like that. And I went to see the Mona Lisa. And you know something, Jan? I thought the Mona Lisa was big. I thought it was about like 5 feet tall or something. It's about that big. And it's guarded by, you know, they got a rail there and there's a guy there with a gun looking at you, especially he was looking at me, I guess he thought I was going to steal it. But if somebody does steal it, the Mona Lisa is on an elevator that goes 50 feet under the ground. If somebody jumps that rail, and all the doors to the Louvre lock. See, that's how much Europeans value their culture. You see, I can't go into some of this though. So I went to see this exhibit of Jesus, these exhibits, and they had it in chronological order. Look, the first depictions of Jesus, he was black. I'm not talking about a man of color. I'm talking about black. Because, you know, sometimes we try to say, well, he was a man of color. And black folk, the only ones who will say things like, well, I don't care what color Jesus is. I just love him. Look, keep loving him. But he was a black man. Then it started moving up. And about 600 AD, Jesus got white. He just started, it almost was like Michael Jackson, just got slowly but surely, he got white. So by 700 AD, he's a white boy. Skinny, stringy hair, hanging up on a cross with blue eyes. So you should know that Jesus was black. Wherever you worship, I don't care if it's the mosque, all of your religious symbolism should be reflecting your culture. European Christianity does that. So don't let religion confuse you. And some people are confused by religion. I ain't got time to go into that. Furnish your home with African art and cultural objects. See, when I walk into your house, I should know I'm in a black house. I mean, if I see pictures of Donald Trump hanging up, or George Washington, or I don't know, Nancy Reagan, I said, this person's confused. They're confused. And seriously, I should know that I'm in a black house. You know, it always gets me when I see African leaders, they'll come to this country or in their own country and they'll dress up in a suit. You know, they dress up in European, or you seen the African judges with the white, what is it, the white wigs? And that's crazy. If Donald Trump came out of the White House now in a dashiki, you would say he was crazy. Now, we already know he is, but you would think he would have really lost his mind. So we should be reflective of our culture in our homes. The next one, stay involved with your children, whether you are married, separated, or divorced. African men must father their children regardless of their circumstances, residence, and age. Support them financially, physically, spiritually. I got that twice. I must really emphasize that. And spiritually, we should always be close to our children, always. You divorce each other, you don't divorce your children. You separate from each other, you don't separate from your children. So that's just another admonition, almost through. Number 9, always have a 5-year plan regardless of your age. You should know what you want to do right now in the year 2023. You should know what you need to be doing right now. I tell my students this at Morgan all the time. What's your 5-year plan? I don't know, Doc. You know, first year I'm going to live with my parents. You know, they call these children boomerang kids because they come back at you, Jan. You let them go and they come back. See, when I got out of high school, I wanted to get away. I still love my parents, but I still want to have my own place. You know, these kids say, I'm going to live with mom for a year so I can save rent. That's right. It's a different world. So think about what you want to be doing. And I'm not saying if you're just 18, 20 years old. I'm saying when you're 50, 60 years, you should have a 5-year plan. So have a goal. Number 10, choose a partner who will help you and the African community grow. Think about how the two of you will make each other happy and the other African world a better place. That should be happy. And ask each other serious questions if you love each other. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Neely Fuller. Y'all know who Neely Fuller is. You should get his book called The Code. And he actually has the questions that black people should ask each other before they're deciding to be into a relationship. So, you know, I tell my students, I mean, what do we ask when we date or something? We'll say things like, Yeah, what's your sign? And like I heard her sister say, stop, what's your sign? Where's the party? Are we gonna go to a movie tonight? And I tell my students, and this is from Frances Cress Welsing, she told us this. She said, you should ask a person, what do you think about white supremacy? People say, what are you talking about? Ask your date that and see what they say. They said, well, I don't think about it. See, you should X that person off. Move on to the next person. So choose a partner that will help you and the African community. And there's examples of this. Ruby D and Ossie Davis. They were my favorite couple of all time. You ever read when they died, what they did with their urns? They said, they wrote on the urn, they both were cremated. And the one says, they said, after I die, put me in an urn, and when you die, put your urn in the urn together, shake them up, and then write on it, we're in this thing together. Wasn't that sweet? I didn't tell the story right, but you get the point. Okay, the next one, eat healthfully. Just eat right. That's why we get some of the diseases we have, particularly, and we've heard it this day, diabetes and other things. Eat right. Don't just eat bad food. And there's so much bad food out there. You probably heard of that study where most black folk in this audience come from West Africa. That's our genetic pool. They have one of the lowest rate of prostate cancer in the world, the men do. They also don't have that many heart problems over there. So they switched the diets of Africans with African Americans and vice versa. 1 year later, studies online, 1 year later, there was elevated blood pressure with the West Africans, and black folk in this country that participated in the study got better. So eat healthfully. I can't stress this enough. And last but not least, tell one person a month for the next year what I just told you, okay? Thank you very much.
Stay right there.
Just stay.
We're going to take some questions. Everybody.
Questions? Any questions about anything? Right here. I want to. She's busy, but I'm going to do that. I do less programming now, but I will do that. We've brought Michelle Alexander, if you read, her book, Frances Welsing, Marimba Ani, Joy Leary, and others. So we're going to bring them back.
Don't you think it's important that if we're going to have, because I graduated from Morgan State's School of Social Work, and do you think that it's important? I went to Morgan back in 2013, but I also went to Morgan in 1975, and there was a groundswell because Dr. Billingsley was the president, and I went in the years where we were in the Free South Africa movement, freeing Mandela. We were in the movement of getting the holiday for Dr. King, and people were very proud. We had people like Dr. Chancellor Williams and Gwendolyn Brooks and Sonia Sanchez, and those kind of people came through. But now it's lacking, and I'm saying for a lot of African universities or Africans in universities, we lack that involvement in our own culture and history. So we walk around very dim about knowing what we are supposed to know or what we're supposed to do. We got to have conferences to do this. And I just think it should be uprising in those communities, in our schools, to bring back a degree of study to understand who you are and how to go out in the world and be impactful. Is the schools thinking about, is that even on the table anymore?
Well, I've taught at several black colleges. Before coming to Morgan, I taught at Fisk, and they always say Fisk was the blackest of the HBCUs. It was private. Morgan is public. And you find much of the activism that has taken place historically at HBCUs or on private campuses, because state-supported schools, they got to answer, you know, to the governor and the legislature and all that other stuff. There's an article in this week's Time magazine called Renewed Activism on HBCU campuses. And I was reading the article, and much of that activism still takes place on private campuses because they have less to worry about in terms of funding. But I agree with you. I mean, you know, what is a black college? It's someplace. If I go to Notre Dame, I expect to hear something about, or learn something about Catholic history. If I go to a woman's college, whatever reason why, I should know something about women's history. If I go to Brandeis, I expect to know something about Jewish history. If I go to Duke, I expect to hear about white supremacy, which you do. So if I go to a black college, I think a minimum expectation is that I know something about black folk. That's just logical to me. And unfortunately, a lot of black colleges don't teach that, but I still would rather, my children, 2 children graduated from a black college. One's a doctor and one's a lawyer. And my daughter, she didn't go to she went to all black from K through her, she's a dentist, all the way, because we just felt that it was important to keep them in black environment. But I think all black institutions also should practice understanding black culture 365 days a year. Churches should, sororities, fraternities, HBCUs, elementary schools, they should practice that. And unfortunately, sometimes we don't. Any other questions? Okay, go ahead.
And that is, I think you and Dr. Washington, is he still here?
I think he out.
Okay. I think one of the things that happened, and it was too trendy to me, is the Black Panther movie, and how many messages are in that movie that need to be taught from a level of understanding what Coogler was trying to convey that we missed. We got those memes that were on Facebook and stuff, but just the small part about when Dr. Washington said that the men were on the perimeter and the women were on the inside, and what that meant. That wasn't something that, because I kind of, you know, followed that for a second and took children to see Black Panther and tried to give them the message after having visit Ghana and doing some other work. So I think that you should find a way to revisit it and bring it back so that this doesn't.
And I'm not exaggerating this. I went to see Black Panther 10 times. And every time I went to see it, I got something new out of it. For example, how many of y'all saw Black Panther? Okay, almost everybody. Remember the scene when they go into the bar? Remember they're getting ready to make this deal. Did you notice the colors that they were dressed in? Black Panther was in black, Lupita was in red, and Denai was in green. See, that was something that was, I asked Coogler because something I wanted to know that I missed at the beginning of the film. Remember when the guy is loading up guns and they, you know, and before they come in, that they were getting ready to take, or they were going to try to break his wife out of prison. That's why they were loading up the guns. And he said in the film, in the director's cut, he's going to put something in there about that. So there were a lot of messages. He deliberately, and told me as well as other people, that he put things in there for us to think about. It wasn't just a movie. It was a lot of things. And that's why it has such worldwide impact at a lot of levels. You can teach in a variety of ways. And I know Coogler is interested in teaching. And I'm going to tell you, I ain't supposed to do it, but I don't think he would mind. We on tape. The film that he's getting ready to do, how many of you have heard of Fred Hampton? Somebody said that? Yeah. Next year is the 50th anniversary of his assassination in Chicago, December 4th, 1969. I went to school in Chicago. And so what we're doing now is we're going to make a film, or he's going to make the film. I'm just doing the research. I don't make no film, but I'm doing the research for him on the things surrounding Fred Hampton. Did you know, for example, that 30 minutes before he was assassinated, that he was poisoned? He was put to sleep by his best friend, drugged by the FBI. His name is William O'Neill. And you can do, and William O'Neill felt so guilty, you know, about this. About 8 years later, he committed suicide. And the way he committed suicide was he ran out on an expressway and got hit by a car. So we're doing a film, he's doing a film about the assassination of Fred Hampton. Okay, any other questions? Okay, we all right, go home.